Okay, next page. This is number 3 on the general Unit 3 quiz. It's about factorizing or factoring. A lot of you guys made some mistakes on this. I'll go over some of those mistakes. You need to understand that whenever you factor a quadratic, like we're looking at here, you're going to end up with two terms that kind of go inside these parentheses. You'll have two terms in here and two terms in here that are multiplied together to become this. In fact, this is exactly the opposite function of what we did in these last 3 problems here. You'll notice I have the 2 bubbles and it turns into this. I have the 2 bubbles and it turns into this. I have 2 bubbles, and when I multiply them together, it turns into this. Well, now I have this, and I'm going to go back to the 2 bubbles. I have this, just like this up here, and I'm right here, and I'm going to go back to the 2 bubbles. So multiplying 2 terms together is just the opposite of factoring. But a lot of you guys, when it said factor, you did this thing. And you said, well, this is a times a, and this is 2 times 2 times 5 times a, and this is 5 times 2 times 5 times 2. And you thought, okay, this is all factored. Well, yeah, each of these terms is factored into its prime factors, but this doesn't help me a lot. I'm looking for 2 things, binomials, when I multiply them together, get back here. Okay? We're going backwards from what we did on this page. So, I know that when I multiply these 2 binomials together, I'm going to multiply this term right here by this term right here, and I have to get that right there. A times a is a squared. I also know that when I multiply this term by this term, I'm going to get that right there. Well, 100 has several factors. You could multiply 100 times 1. Whoops. You could multiply 50 times 2. You could multiply 25 times 4. You could multiply 20 times 5. You could multiply 10 times 10. I could choose any of these to put right here. However, there's only one of these that will make 20 when I add them together. 10 and 10. See, 10 times 10 is 100. 10 plus 10 is 20. However, this is a negative, so I actually need a negative 10 plus a negative 10. So I very simply put in negative 10 and negative 10. I know that these 2 binomials, when I multiply them together, will give me this. A times a is a squared. A times a negative 10 is a negative 10a. Negative 10 times a is also a negative 10a. That gives me a negative 20 right here in the middle. And then a negative 10 times a negative 10 gives me a positive 100. So you can see that this multiplied together gives me this. That is factoring. There were several of you who said, I don't know how to factor. And I said, well, maybe I was a little rude, I don't know. I said, well, you do it the way I've been telling you over and over again in class to do. But now that this is on video, you can watch it over and over again. And by the way, there's also Khan Academy videos on factoring. Okay, and he might speak to it a little better, or a way that you can understand better. The next one we're going to factor is this thing here that only has 2 terms. The middle term's gone. We remember when we did this factoring, there was one that looked like that when we were done. This one on the bottom has the middle term gone. Well, that happened because these ones eliminated themselves. Well, what you notice is it's a 4t plus 9 and a 4t minus 9. The only difference is that the signs are opposite. Well, we're going to follow our pattern there and realize that we're going to have a minus and a plus here. The other thing you notice about this is that 4t is simply the square root of 16t squared. 4t and 4t. Oh. Well, if I just take the square root of 81, that gives me a 9 there and a 9 there. Also notice on this one that the second term, 81, is just the square root. The 9s are just the square root of this 81. So I'm going to come here to my second term, and the square root of 25 is 5. And the square root of t squared is just t. And I'm done. Those two binomials multiplied together give me 81 minus 25t. A lot of you forgot to put your t's down here, and you went 9 minus 5 is 4, 9 plus 5 is, let's see, 4 times 4 plus 5, 14. And so you multiplied 4 and 14, and you got some number, and all because you just forgot your t's. You know what? We're done. That's it. This is the answer right here. Okay? We don't need to do anything else. Next little problem is this one. Now, some of you got pretty confused on this because you forgot that there's a step we have to take sometimes before we do the bubbles, and that is we have to look in each term and see if there's something common. Okay? It has to be in every single term to pull it out. Like, I can't pull a Q out because there's no Q in this term. I can't pull a P out because there's no P in this term. I can't pull a 12 out because 75 isn't divisible by 12. I can't pull a 5 out because 12 isn't divisible by 5. But there is a number I can pull out of this that's common to everything. This is where I actually factored each individual piece. I wrote it out so we could see the common values. The factors of 12 are 2 times 2 times 3, and then I'm going to put a P and a P there. So that's this one term just laid out completely so we can see all of its pieces inside it. The factors of 60 are 2 times 2 times 5. 2 times 2 is 4 times 5 is 20 times 3. And then I have a P there and a Q there. The factors of 75 are 5 times 5 times 3. Now you'll notice there is no 2. Oops, I'm sorry, there's also a Q and a Q. You'll notice there is no 2 here. So I can't pull a 2 out of anything. 3s, there's a 3 there, a 3 there, and a 3 there. The entire reason I lay this out like this is simply so that I can recognize the common factors in every term. So now I'm going to put it all back together, but I'm going to pull that 3 out of it. I'm going to pull a 3 out, and then I'm going to just write down what's left in here. When I pull a 3 out of this, the thing that's left is 2 times 2, which is 4, and P times P, which is P squared. Okay? You'll see 3 times 4P squared is 12P squared. See how that works? On this term, I have a minus, and then I pulled that 3 out. It's already in front. Don't need to do anything else with it. But what's left is a 2 and a 2 and a 5, which is 2 times 2 is 4 times 5 is 20. And there's a P and a Q left. And you'll notice that 3 times 20 PQ, 3 times a negative 20 PQ is a negative 60 PQ. The next thing I look at is this last one. Once again, I pulled that 3 out, and what's left is 5 times 5, which is a positive 25. And there's a Q times a Q right there, so I'm going to write Q times Q, which is Q squared. All I've done was pull a 3 out. And a lot of you guys are like, oh, I factored it completely. But if you look closely at this, you realize you've got more steps. 4P squared, if I take the square root of this, is 2 times P. If I take the square root, oh, and I have to put a 2 times p there as well. 2p times 2p is 4p squared. 25q squared, if I take the square root of that, gives me 5q and 5q. 5q times 5q is 25q squared. What about this middle term? Well, it's negative. So if I put a negative here and negative here, a negative 5q times a negative 5q gives me this positive 5q. And a 10pq negative plus another 10pq negative gives me a negative 20pq. So this is fully factored. Or as they say in Singapore, factorized. Okay? This is a little more complex. Watch it over and over again if you need to. Now let's look at this one. A lot of you guys did the bubble thing. You're like, okay, got to put it in a bubble. But what you didn't notice is that there's an A and an A and an A in each of these. Once again, let's spread this out so we can see it. Okay? This is not the complete factorization of this. This is just spread out and factored by each term so I can just see what's common. I'm going to do the same thing here. A times A times A minus 2 times 2 times 2 times A times A plus 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times A. Now, there are no 2's in this first term, so I can't pull any of these 2's out. I have to leave them there. But there is an extra A. And you guys were asking yourselves, what do I do with that stupid extra A? Well, it's in every single term. So let's pull it out in front and do a step before I do my bubbles. And if I pull an A out in front here, what I have left here is A squared. What I have left here is 8A. And what I have left here is 16. A times A squared is A cubed. A times negative 8A is negative 8A squared. And A times 16 is 16A. See how that works? Now that I've pulled that A out of the way, undistributed it, factored it out, I can do some bubbles. Okay? Now a lot of you forgot to put the A in front here. You just did the bubbles and forgot about that A. If you forget about that A, it's not the same thing. You got to keep it there. But I do know that I can put an A there and an A there and get A squared. I can put a 4 there and a 4 there and it gives me 16. I can put a minus there and a minus there, and that gives me a negative 4A minus 4A is a negative 8A, which means this is my completely factored set of factors that, when multiplied together, will give me that back.